Morning, morning, morning. Morning.
Yeah, take out. Okay, you guys follow Miss Lisa right there?
Right on time. Everybody's on time.
Okay, come on, Kim, right in this way. You follow Miss Follow Miss Stevie. It's a bridge, let's go. What's now? Stay open.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that. Well, I'm not pretty yet.
Okay.
I'm pretty, but it's not.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just want to get a picture of Terry working. It's hardly ever. He's always talking, never working. There we go. Good, Terry.
Very, very hard.
Thank you. I have a PhD in geography from UC Davis.
How many of you know who Mr. Rogers is?
So,
Do you ever
I wish we
remember
had more
watching
time together,
Mr.
but I would
Rogers
ask
as a
each
kid?
of you
Well, this guy down
where
here,
you
his
live.
name is Sheriff John. He was like the Mr. Rogers.
Well, Gretchen, it's happening.
It's happening, and we're very excited, and so far it's working smoothly, and the kids really seem to be enjoying
They
the
do.
stations.
They do. They do. And these are the fourth graders.
They are the fourth graders, and we're going to have fourth graders from both Westpark and Rosamond Elementary.
Okay, and they're going to be the morning audience, but then this afternoon, I understand the public is invited too.
That is correct. At 1:30, we are open for everybody to come. We will be here until probably about 6:30 when we're going to have to start cleaning up because the library closes at 7.
I see.
We do have a short little meeting at 5 where we're going to officially elect officers, have our installation, and introduce those people who have made special trips to visit us.
Aha. How nice. How nice. Now, are you going to do this every year?
I don't think so.
No?
This is the big 60th, excuse me, I have to tell them to rotate.
Okay. Okay, we got them to rotate. So.
We got the kids to rotate.
Right.
Do you have any other questions? Oh, just a second, John.
Sure.
Go ahead and have a seat.
Come have a seat. And I'm going to take your arm from you because I need them for the next bus.
Go ahead and have a seat on the
And
desk.
so,
Take your
would you
necklace
guys
off.
remember you are a purple arm. So pay attention when you guys rotate to your left.
It's okay.
Hi everybody, welcome, good morning. Come on and sit up front here. Those of you in the back, there's plenty of room up here.
This is the logo that he came up with. You'll notice there's a little R, there's a little R mounted.
Oh, wait, you don't have to sit louder.
Joshua, come on.
Be sure to come back with your kids.
So, what school are you from? Westpark. Okay. Westpark did not exist when I went to elementary school, so I had to go to Rosamond. But I
didn't know if I could
stayed,
drink that or
I
not.
went to
It's okay, we drink that?
life. I graduated from high school.
Oh, thank you.
I went to college and graduate school, and right
It's
now I'm
mildly
in Sacramento.
CT.
State capital.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The first school I ever went to. Well, my mom taught me stuff at home. But no, I went to kindergarten when I was in elementary. You were not? Where were you?
So you were homeschooled for the...
I was born in elementary. So the display that I'm going to show to you today is about a place called Willow Springs, which is about a 10-minute drive to the west. All right, and it's where I grew up. I used to be on the bus there and go to school. My family has been there since the 1930s. My family is still there. Very small family. And have any of you ever been out to Willow Springs? What have you seen there? Racetrack. So there's a display about the racetrack. When you move You can see that one. But if you drive past the racetrack and then turn right, and then turn left, you end up in this town.
My great grandmother's
Oh, okay. All right. With the racetrack. Thank you. So when you pass that, the racetrack is actually named after this place, the Willow Springs Village, where there used to be willow trees and there used to be springs that flow. All right. So I'm going to put this up here because it's distracting if they're passing around, but if you have time, you can come up and look at it. Right? Before I tell you more about Willow Springs, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge who the original first peoples of this area are, and that's the Antelope people. And Willow Springs was once a Antelope village.
Sure.
The Antelope people are still around, but not in Willow Springs. They're part of the Kern tribe, which has a So let's acknowledge the Antelope people as the original caretakers of this land and honor their elders, the past, and the present, and their emerging youth. I also want to acknowledge the other tribes of the area. So here we are, partway between Lancaster and Mojave is Rosamond and Rosamond.
There are, Rosamond's are kind of up there, but not real clear.
When you're in college or if you're giving a presentation in certain places like Australia, you're always to acknowledge the first people who did it. So there's a website where you can learn how to do that. We can borrow the words that I just used. So whenever you travel, I challenge you to ask around, do research, and find out who's land you're on. This website here actually is really cool.
Yeah, it's up on the mountain on the side of
The Wi-Fi's not working quite right.
before there was
Let's show you that there's this map. You can type in the address of where you are or where you want to know the original people.
now you're going to walk over to this lady here, and she's going to tell you all about Poncho Barnes.
Where you
There's
are.
another famous person from there. All right, you guys can just stand up and look
So,
at her exhibit.
when I grew up in Willow Springs, I knew that it had been a Native American site. I didn't know the name of the people, and I didn't know much about them, and I didn't know when they left or why they left. I did know that eventually Willow Springs Village, about 1900, this guy named Ezra Hamilton found gold there, and they built up these rock buildings. I grew up in one of the houses, the rock houses that he built. He had a health resort there. The springs flowed, filled swimming pools, and lots of people from all over came. My family came there about 30 years later, and has lived there ever since. My great-grandfather. So, how do you think Willow Springs got its name? Willow trees. All right. So we've got native willow trees right here. You might be more familiar with the weeping willows. These have actually come from China, and they've been planted. But this willow is really interesting. So willows, and this is a cottonwood. Willows and cottonwoods need a lot of water to grow. So when you see them, you can tell that there's water there. They're walking down in a ravine by a stream. So Willow Springs. Springs don't flow anymore, and there were no willows for a long time until recently, because the agriculture around this area had used so much water that the water in the ground, the water table dropped to the point where it didn't naturally flow out of the ground in the springs. Right? So without the water, you can't have life. Right? But my Aunt Mary put in a pond near her house, and because she didn't plant it, this tree popped up. So seeds from a willow that had grown there 50 years ago, maybe 70 years ago, were still waiting in the ground to have access to water, and now there's trees. So it's really important to take
They were patient.
They were very patient. And they're not the only one. There's some other native plants that are popular. So I know you've been to a lot of exhibits, and I appreciate your attention. I know it's hard to listen this long. And I'm hoping that you're also liking it. Thank you. There's a few things I want you to pick up from this exhibit. If you didn't know the Willow Springs Village is there, take some time, ask your family to drive out there. You can drive through. It is private land, but you're welcome to drive through and look and see this and stuff. Know whose land you're on. Remember that the first people are still around today. So we talk about them in the present. All right. Native Americans sing and dance now. They write history now. It's not just all past. The other thing is that time is a really interesting thing. Right? Time is very relative. So if this string is a timeline, here we are in 2019, and let's make an inch for every 10 years. So, right? So 2010, 2000. Right? Maybe born in 2000? 2001?
No.
Oh, 928? 2009? Oh yeah. You guys, my math is off. It would be 19 if you were born in 2000. Okay, 10 inches for 100 years. Alright, now we're in 1900. This is when Ezra Hamilton found Mills and built the health resort. Alright, going back forward in time, 1950s, 1960s, that's when the water table started to drop and the springs started to dry up. Right? So between this time and this time is when there was a really booming settler population there. And from here to here, it's a much smaller group of people living there. Alright, so 1900. Let's go back to 1800, 10 more inches, right? 1800, that's before the Anglo-Americans came here, before California was a state. Around 1850, right? All right, so between here and here, it's Mexico, is where we are as part of Mexico. 1800s with 10 inches, we're in 1700, all right? The Spanish missionaries hadn't even come yet, that was about 1750, when the missions So everything before this, all going back, far, to time immemorial, is the history of the original people of the land. Right? And I know my history book. I'm trying to talk to you about the history book part. But it goes faster. I don't think I mentioned it. So when I was in 4th grade, my history book, it was this brown history book. I still remember. I really liked history and social studies. And I was really interested. I wanted to know about Native Americans, and what it left me with was very confusing. So the story went sort of like this. Once upon a time, there were Native Americans. They did these cool things. Then the Spanish came and put them into missions, living in the missions, and there were diseases, and lots of them died, and then the gold rush happened, and then no mention of Native Americans. It left me very confused. I didn't know what to do with it when I was in 12th grade. I tucked it away in the back of my brain. But it never made sense to me. So it wasn't until I went to college and grad school and I started, and as an adult, that I started thinking, who were those people? And I also realized I thought of them in the past, and I thought of Native Americans all the same. But as an adult, I keep learning, and I have learned that in fact, there isn't one thing called Native Americans or one thing called California Indians. That's a grouping of people, or indigenous people. That's a grouping of people who are related to the land, have a relationship with the land that their families came from way, way back. Right? In fact, these tribes have names. So, what's the name of the tribe that we're that I acknowledged the land we're on? Katanama. Can everybody say Katanama? Katanama. Let's do it one more time. Katanama. Good job. So when you leave here today, like I said, if you haven't been to Willow Springs, I encourage you to go out there. Remember that the land, figure out the land that you're on. Use this interactive map, find maps. Remember that maps are not always true. Sometimes they just reflect what people think is true, or something that they want you to know. So always take it with a grain of salt. That Native people are still here, and that time is relative. Right? I'd like to read to you a passage, a little paragraph, and a little story, and think about what year could this be written about. All right, now what you know about Willow Springs. So this is from an article called Historic Willow Springs. Along a main road of the last century is a cluster of stone buildings. The slowly disintegrating walls of an even older adobe and a large masonry horse trough, all set in a grove of venerable cottonwood trees. He doesn't mention it, but they're beautiful. The place is Willow Springs, a community started over a century ago, such as 100 years, which attained its peak population of several hundred shortly after the year 1900. Today, Willow Springs, shrunk to 4 or 5 families, clings to life by a slender thread, refusing to accept the label of a ghost town. 4 children regularly board the school. All right.
Okay,
Any
'cause I just
guesses
now got
what
it.
the author- What year the author was writing this?
Time to rotate.
All right, I'll tell you the answer. Could be
Just
anything.
finished.
Could be a day. Yeah. He was writing about it.
We have a time delay here.
He wrote it in 1960.
I was gonna start.
Okay, come on over here.
Oh my god.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Oh, welcome.
Now that you
Come on in, everybody.
Fair here in Rosamond. You know your fair? You guys seen the fair in Lancaster with the Ferris wheels and stuff? That was in Rosamond. Out by the high school, there's an arena. You know what an arena is? Okay, so there's an arena out there, and that's where they had the rodeo. We had the kids showed their livestock. Their like they go to you go to AV Fair and you see the pigs and the sheep and the goats. Well, that's what we had here in Rosamond for many years. And one of this, I don't know if any of you know Mrs. Hemmis from Rosamond Elementary, but this is her picture from when she was young, when she went out for Miss Rosamond. This is a picture of her handing out awards. There's, you can see, and if you come, this guy down here is called Sheriff John. And he was the child entertainer like Mr. Rogers is today. Like he entertained, he had one of the first TV shows designed just for kids. Some of us remember watching him when we were kids. These 2 gentlemen, Kyle Fishman and George Putnam, were very famous news people from Channel 5. You guys have seen TV, so you know Channel 5 was always up here for all of our events. One of the things that they did was we needed to design a logo like Westpark has, the Wildcat. Well, we needed to design a logo, so it was open to everybody in Rosamond. And we had kids and adults working to design this. Well, they chose this one. This is the design that won. It's on a lot of our Rosamond stuff. This man right here, Cecil Burton, he's the one that actually designed this. And if you'll notice, there's a little R on there also for the R Mountain that's over by the freeway. Okay, so one of the reasons, I hope nobody uses these as an ashtray anymore, because you all know smoking is not good for you. But years ago, smoking was a normal thing. I mean, even Cruella de Vil from the Disney show smoked. We know now that's not what you should do. But one of the reasons I think this ashtray is so special is because I know the gentleman that designed it. It was silk screened. That's what they called this painting on the back. And then it's baked. And it was done by my grandparents because that's what their business was at the time, was they did the ashtrays for a lot of places. My grandpa could walk into anywhere and tell when he painted that ashtray, because he had done 90% of the ashtrays in the States. And so he did them for our Rosamond Fair. The people, Little Britches is still a rodeo going on today in many states. The national finals now moved from Littleton, Colorado to Oklahoma City. There's 20-some thousand kids that still participate every year. They, like kids that if any of you play football, and you go to other places, and eventually you hope to make it to the national maybe. Everybody has a dream of being a football player. Well, rodeoing was very, very popular, and there's still rodeos all across the United States. And we had one, like I say, one of the largest. We had all of the games that you see in Lancaster, we had those out here in Rosamond. Does anybody have a question? Yes.
What is he doing?
He's right, this is called, because it's a horse, it's called a bronc rider. And he's doing saddle bronc. Saddle bronc is one thing I would never do because I always had a fear of getting hung up in the stirrup. I personally preferred bareback bronc. Yes, real quick because it's about time to move.
What materials did your grandparents use to make the saddle? I mean, like, how did they get it?
You know, I don't honestly know. That was their job. That was the kind of paint that it was the ink and I know that it was ran across. Yes.
Always on smoking normal.
Because back then, we didn't realize how bad smoking was for you, and it just was like a thing that everybody did.
So people thought smoking was good back then?
Yes, back then it was considered okay. Yes.
And then they found out.
They found out it kills your lungs and everything else about you. Okay, you guys need to, yes, quickly.
My grandpa used to smoke, but then my mom used to,
Languages and number of
my grandpa used to smoke.
Yep, yes.
and that
Come on over. Come around.
Yeah. Okay, go
Come around so you can all see.
sit down. Go sit down, your legs hurt. Go sit down. I understand.
Come on around.
when I was growing up.
Okay, go listen to Pancho Barnes.
Yeah, come around here so you can all see.
Spanish word, it means dagger. Okay, and so that was given. So
How about you in the back? Can you see them? You guys want, if you want to come around here, where you can see a little better.
They took their name, so it's a modern name, they took that name because before, and there was a reservation there. Okay. Of the reservation. And then the government took the reservation away and sent some of them to another name. And a lot of the native people then just tried to blend it in.
My name is Lynn. I'm with the Antelope Valley Rural Museum, which is at the Antelope Valley Fairgrounds. And we're open on certain days during the year, but we're always open during the fair. Have you all been to the fair? To the AV Fair? You've never been to the AV Fair? Well, have your parents take you and come see our museum. It's really nice. And one of the displays that we have in our museum is the Pancho Barnes display. She called herself Pancho, but her name was really Florence Lowe, and her first husband's name was Barnes, and she kept the name Barnes even though she was married 4 times. But her first husband's name was Barnes, and fascinating character. She was one of the first women to fly airplanes, and she would fly a small plane like that, which you see in the picture here behind her, and she would do stunt flying. And she did stunt flying in the movies. Do you know what I mean by stunt flying? And in those days they called it barnstorming, where you go out and you fly over the farms and you do circles and twist and fly in low.
Things that are cool.
Pretty scary, but very cool. Yeah. And so she was a famous aviator. Very early on, at the same time as Amelia Earhart. Have any of you heard of Amelia Earhart? She was a very famous pilot, if not the first woman pilot, certainly one of the very first. And she was going to fly around the world, and her plane disappeared. And it's a great mystery today. They're still trying to find her and her co-pilot. But it's been decades since she disappeared. And there's a picture in this book. This book was done by a local woman named Barbara Schultz, and the name of the book is Pancho, all about Pancho Barnes. There's a photo in here, and here's Pancho Barnes with Amelia Earhart and another female pilot. But she became famous in our area, when she grew up near Pasadena, wealthy family, and she started a ranch on the property that is now Edwards Air Force Base. Are you all familiar with Edwards Air Force? Yeah, I know a lot of people. You'll have parents or relatives who work there. It is one of the premier test pilot facilities in the world, or test, I should say, aerospace, aviation testing, going back to the 40s, the mid-40s, when it was called Muroc, and I think that means we have to change stations. But at any rate, she had a ranch there, and a lot of the famous pilots would go to her ranch to just kind of hang out. It was a friendly place, and it looks like we have to move on. So that's as much as I can tell you about Poncho. I think, you're very welcome. Your next stop is a good one. It's the feline breeding compound.
That was our first stop. Everybody outside lined up along the building.
Yeah, this is about our museum.
Guys.
And tell your parents. And that's what I'm gonna do.
Before the kids, I heard.
The fair was here in Rosamond.
Yes.
We had the Little Britches Rodeo that went along with the fair. We had the largest Little Britches Rodeo during the time this side of Littleton, Colorado, which is where they had the national finals at the time. The national finals have since moved to Oklahoma. But we had the largest, we had the best prizes, and we had people come from Washington, Nevada, Oregon,
sure,
everywhere to participate in our rodeo. We had Sheriff John used to come up, Hal Fishman, George Putnam, all came. In fact, the dating game at the time sent a couple out here that was on the dating game to be in our fair parade and to come to our rodeo and stuff.
So it was on the map. It was
definitely.
well known.
It was very well known. There were several people that were very instrumental in getting it started. The Kiwanis Club sponsored it for years and years, and it just kind of died down because we couldn't get younger volunteers.
Oh, I see.
And that's what happens with pretty much anything. You get volunteers, and after 10 years, they're like, okay, we need more help. But, every school club participated. Everybody had a booth at the fair. We had participation from kids through, all of them. We had the pet show for the little kids. We had livestock show. 4-H kids, FFA kids showed their beef, their goats, their pigs, all of it here. It was kind of a prep to go to AV fair because they were all smaller during our fair.
Sure. And I heard you talking about the ashtrays that your family made.
They were designed by Cecil Burton. And then my grandmother silked them and my grandfather baked them. That was their business.
Wow. What was the name of the business? Do you know?
I can't remember. Grandpa's store.
And where is he? Is his picture up here?
No, he's gone. He's gone.
Okay.
He's gone. There is a picture of my father, Jim Williford, with Pat Wambacher. She was Miss Rosamond 66. Miss Rosamond 66.
There we go.
And Jim Williford was very instrumental in getting the rodeo started. We went to a rodeo in Tehachapi. And then he said that's what Rosamond needs to do. So then we did one, started him here.
Started it here. Well, he was very active. That's why I'm glad there's a park named after him.
Community was everything to him.
Yeah.
He started him and Wanka Kirk started the first reading program that they had here in Rosamond.
Really?
back before it, yeah, like in the 60s. Wanda started the early 60s. Wanda wanted a reading program, and Dad said, okay. And Kiwanis bought ribbons and gave, and at the beginning they were just little plain ribbons, and at the end they were big rosette ribbons. You know, but yeah, he was very instrumental in that.
Yeah.
So,
With Miss Ella.
Okay, here comes your crowd. Thank you so much.
hello. Coming in a different way this time.
Well, we got sidetracked.
Description of what's going on here with Poncho Barnes.
Okay, I'm with the Antelope Valley Rural Museum, which is at the fairgrounds in Lancaster.
Yes.
And among our many displays is our Poncho Barnes display. And she is a very, pretty well known, at least to a certain generation, as quite the character who lived in the Antelope Valley. And she was one of the early aviators.
Yes.
And flew small airplane like you see there, and was a stunt pilot, and including doing stunt flying in the movies. But she's most known around here for having established what was called a dude ranch on what was then Muroc Base. It hadn't become Edwards Air Force Base yet, but she was on the actual property that is now Edwards Air Force Base.
I see.
And it was called the Happy Bottom Riding Club, and she welcomed some of the very famous aviators from Edwards Air Force Base, including Chuck Yeager, who was, of course, known for breaking the sound barrier in the mid-1940s. But eventually she had to move off of that property, and I think it ended up in something of a court battle with Edwards Air Force Base. But she was quite a character and was known. You could see her in Lancaster now and then, and she lived in Boron for a while and ultimately died there, I believe, in the 1970s.
In Boron.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, yes, she's a famous person. Around here.
Yeah, she
right.
really is, and the kids aren't familiar with her, but
No.
they all know about Edwards Air Force Base, and so we'll try to introduce her to them.
Sure. This is a good part of California history.
It's great.
Which the
It
fourth
is,
graders
yeah.
take.
500-mile trip every year.
Okay. Give me your name first.
My name is Gail Seekins, and
S-I-C-K-E-N?
S-E-E-K-I-N-S.
Okay.
And right now I live over on 72nd Street West and Avenue A.
Okay.
And we come out and do. This is the first time I've done a historical thing with
this auto.
With Fran. Fran called me up and asked me. She flagged me down actually one day and said, "Hey, can you come out and do this?"
Well, tell me about the auto. Tell me, you were starting to tell me of the
I bought this up in Arlington, Washington, and it was pretty much the way it is. And my brother and he lives up in Montana, and he went to we went out on a run one time, and when we come back, he wouldn't let me drive it. So I said, no, this isn't going to work. So we found this one about 6 years ago, and I've been on runs every June since that. And we go on, like I say, 500-mile runs up in Montana, up through the back roads of Montana, where we visit ghost towns and old mining camps.
Sure, not driving this car though.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
This goes 500 miles every year.
Oh, you drive this car?
Oh yes. And we go about 120 miles a day in this, and sometimes we have a breakdown. I mean, they're a labor of love. But we have a lot of fun in doing it. We go with about 14 other cars at the same time.
I see.
And when we do that, we have a trouble car that goes along behind us and with a trailer, and
Tools.
if we have a problem, then they either get fixed or they get towed in. And so they're a labor of love, and they're a lot of fun.
And so this is a 4-cylinder.
4-cylinder.
20
Ford
model.
20 horsepower.
Yeah.
There's lawnmowers at home, riding lawnmowers that have more horsepower than this. It does about 40-45 miles an hour. You know, sometimes with a backwind. But they're a lot of fun.
It's okay. Yeah. Good. Well, here come the kids.
Yeah. Awesome. This is a 1915 Model T. So maybe we will wait till all the rest of them get over here so they can all hear.
How many of these were built? Do you know?
Oh my gosh. That's a good question. I do not know that answer.
Ford would probably know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're in books, but these beat out the horses. Okay?
And walking.
And walking. And with these, you could haul a lot more groceries on these than you could on a horseback.
Yeah, right.
And by the time you got home with jostling around on a horse, it might be butter. The milk.
Well, this is great of you to come out and give these 4th graders a look at it.
Well, thank you very much for the interview.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi. Well, we'll go with what we got. This is a 1915 Model T Ford. How many of you ever heard of Henry Ford? He's the guy that made. He's the guy that made this. Okay, and back in the day, okay, this is like 104 years old. That's a long time, and it actually runs.
Is it?
Runs real well.
What's he
Would
got?
you like to hear it?
Yeah.
It feels exactly
Let's make it fun.
All right.
You just worked on a car.
Look at me. Look at me.
And back in that day, around Henry Ford's day, they didn't have speedometers. So my only speedometer that I have is this GPS thing here. Okay, that keeps me from getting a ticket going through a school zone. Okay, because that's about the only place that I would get a ticket with this thing. It only goes about 45 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour. That one, yeah. I think I might have a tough time beating him because he's got a different gearing system than this one has. But in that day, they only made cars with wooden spokes, like the old stagecoaches and things like that. These are wooden. Those are wood.
And then eventually you worked up to that thing.
Then you worked up to that thing. This is slower, medium fast, real fast.
Do we get that one?
And I showed you how to start it with electric starter. This is how you start it back in the day before they had those. Okay? You would come out here and you would say, and you would hook that in like that and you would pull. Okay? And if the key was on it up front, this would start. And this is back in the day where they made them really pretty. Okay? They started putting on brass radiators, putting brass rings on,
Wait, Ford
and then they
made
put, huh?
Ford made this back in the day?
Ford made this. Yeah.
Wow.
See the Ford emblem? That means Ford. He's the one that made it. And back then, they made the running lights, okay, out of brass like that also. But I don't have them. I'm still looking for them. And they're not easy to find. But we'll find them. Huh? I drive this thing. Every year, I go up to Montana, where I'm from, okay, and we go on a 500-mile trip with this thing, out on the back roads, not out on pavement here, out on the back roads of Montana, and we go out on the dirt. we have a lot of fun doing it. So we travel about 120 miles a day, and then we stop in between and have lunch and drink some sodas or whatever, and then get back in and go out.
How often do you have to put water in the radiator?
When you look in there, and it says you can't see any water, then you put it in.
Oh, so if you're in the mountains, probably more often because they're going up and down, huh?
Yeah, and it's they're a labor of love.
Sure.
How many of you have ever heard of baling wire? Baling wire is something that you keep handy in your toolkit with one of these here cars, okay? Because sometimes you're going to need it. How many of you ever heard Band-Aid and baling wire? Probably the older generation around. Sometimes we have to put some Band-Aids and baling wire on this thing to make sure it works. Do I have a trunk? Yes. Here's my trunk. This trunk keeps my heater, and this is my air conditioning. My air conditioning is 45 miles an hour and a good, fresh, clean air. And here's my reserve water, or Prestone, and here's my reserve gasoline, because there isn't a lot of gasoline out in the middle of nowhere. And pushing these is not a lot of fun either.
What's this little kind of gate thing here for?
That's my luggage rack.
I was wondering. Okay.
And actually, when I'm out on a run, I have 2 spare tires there. Okay. One time I was going down the road, and my right front tire decided to pass me. It comes off. The rubber come off the main. When you change the tires on these, this thing has what we call 4 lug nuts. 1, 2, 3, 4. This separates from the wooden spokes. Okay.
Okay.
And then this comes off. Well, when I was going down the road on the other side, this rubber came off. It went flat. And it passed me going down the road. So I had to pull over, put the new tire on, and then we took off.
Bye guys.
But yeah, if you guys want to get a picture, get a picture up front.
Yes, sir.
Wait,
We're going to look at the history of Rosamond here real quick.
wait, where's my arm go?
All right, Mr. Tom, you're up.
Okay, get going where you're supposed to go.
Okay, stand in line so you can see him.
Okay, you guys, so we're talking about the history of Rosamond, right? Rosamond, what we're talking about. So my wife here, her family has been in business in Rosamond for 97 years. So that's some history in Rosamond. Yeah. You know where the tire store is in Rosamond?
Yeah.
Right there was Tommy's Garage in 1923. Tommy's Garage was owned by her grandfather, Tommy Loomis. And one of his sons was Bob Loomis. And Bob, when he got back from World War II, worked for his dad, tearing vehicles apart. And he went into China Lake and bought 3 of these trucks from China Lake Naval Base, and he made this truck his private vehicle. And he used to drive this running parts for his dad at Tommy's Garage. And they actually used it as a tow truck too. They used to tow vehicles into the shop. But when Bob got old enough, he started his own business, which was R&J Auto Parts, in the same location where Tommy's Garage was. And that's where the tire store was. It was there up until the 90s. I can't remember the exact day. In 2000. It was there up until 2000. And in 2000, he sold it to, he died. And the family sold the property to the tire store. But Char and her sister Mel had bought the Foster Freeze in Rosamond in '89. So same family, still in business in Rosamond, and they're still open till this day. So that's 97 years that her family has been in business in Rosamond. So that's some history in Rosamond. What's that?
We got it.
Yeah. You guys got any questions? Yeah, you guys can get in there.
Half of you are going to go here and half come over here.
Yeah. Okay. Go crawl up in there.
So we're going to learn to
You do
change
not
the spark
start it. I
plug.
know you know how to start it. So do not
Yeah, we do.
No, you're the driver's seat. You're the driver. Come on. Now you let her drive you. Okay, when she gets out, let her drive, and then when she gets out, then you can drive.
Spark plug.
Don't push no buttons down there because the starter's down there.
And you're going to change your the spark plug on an engine.
All right, come on, let somebody else get in there.
Okay? And so when you look at your spark plug, see how it has two connectors? Kind of like when you put your light
Get in there.
That's what makes the spark.
Put it up here. There you go.
And then on the end of these, you'll see it has little connectors.
All right,
You
next
gotta
girl.
connect in.
Isaiah.
One at a time.
You're
one
gonna
at a
go
time.
towards this window. Just right.
Do not start that thing, kid.
All right, Jen, put your arm on the outside and go like that.
Her dad's one of my friends, so I know she's
And then you just put the connector on for it to connect.
Yeah, come on.
Wait, your grandpa?
Get in there.
Give it a sassy look. Don't just drive normal.
I want to try.
There you go. Guess what? You're tall enough to drive this thing. Tall enough to drive this thing.
Pan's doing those ripples, like he said, the big ones will maybe catch the bigger stuff, but the little stuff that's like the black sand, it would actually get caught in these little ripples, the littler ones like that. And then at the end of the day, we'd clean all that out, maybe put it in the pan and get it panned down. And if some of the gold was real fine, like the black sand is, that's basically concentrates. And then he's going to tell you how we'd send it to the smelter, and then they would heat it up and pour it into to ingots or bricks, which are going to either be made into coins or in the old days, or jewelry or whatever. It's part of the industrial part of the process.
Okay, am I ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, once it's done and he's panned all that out, it all comes to me. I'm at the lab now. Okay, the lab is quite a technical process, and I'm just here to show you a simplistic view of the lab. Basically, the lab is going to take all that aggregate at the end of the day, or once or twice a day, and they're going to heat this up into a melting pot like this. And well, the iron is going to come out, and it's going to just boil over, and it's going to drop it out, and it's going to look like this slag. That's what it's called, slag. It's this shiny stuff on the side of this melting pot. And, well, anyway, the slag, it gets skimmed off. It might be in there. Anyway, they get rid of the slag, and then they have the gold sitting in front of them, and they'll pour it off into a form, and they'll make gold bars on it. It'll say 99.9% pure. Okay, and basically that goes to the mint, into the banks, and that's what we use to take care of this country. Under one country, one flag, under God. And so, you know, there's been a lot of hard workers in this country in the past, and I hope in the future. Sometimes they had to pick up a drill like this. Maybe your hubby was maybe a miner. He had to pick up one of those heavy units. And he had to hold that thing sometimes, maybe 8-10 hours up against the inside of a mine underground. And I've done this. He had to punch holes with a machine that weighed maybe 200 pounds, maybe better, with the hose attached to it. And it just pounded all day like this. And maybe there was 2 or 3 guys that helped him hold this thing up in there until it got the bit started into the sidewalls of the underground mine. And once they got that all punched in, a guy like me, I did explosives. He'd set the charges maybe in the ground or up on the wall underneath the ground. And he'd blast maybe 200-300 holes, maybe the size of this parking lot, which I did. And they were 20-foot holes. I used to drill these 20-foot holes. And I drill them in sequence all through this lot. If it was gold, without any gold extension. And I'd pour the gel into the hole as little beads. And then I'd also have my line and my caps in the hole with it. And then I'd just throw a little dirt over the top of it, and I'd run everything down, and I'd hook all those lines down the hill of those caps. And I'd run it down the hill, and I'd have a little plunger, and I'd go click, and it would go ba-boom! And when you went back up there, the dirt was about 6 foot higher from the impaction in the soil. It would raise the dirt that much. And it would be settled up there, and we'd take a loader up there, and we'd pick up this aggregate rock, and we'd take it to a crusher, and the crusher was a jaw crusher. And it went like this. It received the heavy equipment, would dump it into a grizzly. A grizzly is a machine that loads it into a conveyor belt and it takes it over to the crusher. The crusher had jaws like this. It was a jaw crusher. And it would crush a rock that was as big as this girl here sometimes. It was that tall, big boulder. And it would just... And then, yeah, it'd just crush everything. And then it would go through another conveyor belt to another shaker table. And the shaker table had screens, sort of like this metal screen, different sizes. And it would have big holes and then little holes, and it would drop it down. And if it didn't get crushed through by the time it got to these little holes, it would take it back through again and cipher it through, and it'd go through the crusher again to make sure it was pulverized down to about the size of rock that's right here underneath my feet. And once that was done, then it would have cyanide applied to it at these mines. 750 parts per million. The cyanide would leach into that, and it would take and drop the gold off of it, and it would go to the lab, and that's where this process would take place. A lot of guys, they didn't use cyanide, they just dredged like this, and they just took the nuggets and they went with it. Some guys use mercury, and that wasn't too good. Go ahead.
Where is this sample here from?
Well, ma'am,
we actually salted this. We put the
Okay, so you did salt it.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we can't tell you about that.
Basically, when these guys started studying about the gold rush of 1849, there's two types of gold. There's the free gold or lode, like what this is, like what there was in back in 1849. That's what everybody wants. That's the easy stuff. There's not a lot of the easy stuff still left around. Now, the Soledad Mountain up off of Silver Queen Road, that stuff is hard rock. That's all the gold and stuff is in the ore, so you can't see it. If you were to crush that, it would pan like this, but to process it, they use the cyanide to heat bleach.
Do me a favor, before you leave here, the prospectors, some of them were cabinet makers, some of them were veterans. The women, they made food for us guys to work. We needed nourishment. You thank your parents for giving you the nourishment to be here today. You thank God for everything you have. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Joe. Or Mr. Jan. Okay, and you guys are going to
step on the curb, we always stay back.
Mary Jane,
Off the curb, listening, please. And let's move down this way. Get shoulder to shoulder. Get shoulder to shoulder.
Bible.
All right, now, repeat after me. I pledge allegiance. No, go ahead. Joe, I'm going to start this out. All right, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, get a little closer here. I want some camaraderie. Get real close. We got a 55-gallon drum here, and it's supposedly full of water. Can you imagine? It's up to here, and it sucks the water out of this tank. It goes into this antique pump, and a gentleman Jim, that's who I am today, I pump this thing as fast as I can. Not very fast anymore. It runs the water out of this one, it goes into here, and it throws the water into that at enormous speed. And well, my friend here, gentleman, his name is Gentleman George. Hello, everybody. And anyway, Gentleman George takes his shovel Here, pay attention here, son. And he threw the dirt into the deal, and the water rolls through here, and it rolls up like this, in this pattern, from this point forward. And as it rolls up in there, it drops traces of gold up here. See this here? Everybody?
Yeah.
See those little fragments?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it drops black sand, which he's going to show you the black sand, and he's going to show you the gold in his pen. Okay? And it's going to roll through. Now, every once in a while, we got to clean this riffle box out. Okay?
Gold's heavy, so right there you can see it, but if I dip a little water in there, shake it up, now you can't see any. But if we want to get rid of more of that dirt, we just shake that to keep that gold at the bottom, and then we can wash away a lot of this dirt. We got to keep shaking once in a while to make sure that, especially some of that gold will be just as fine as the black sand in there, which is actually iron. And we don't want to wash it overboard if we had some real fine stuff, so we keep shaking it, get it to settle at the bottom, and then we let the water do the work and get rid of a little bit more of it. And then when we want to look and see what we got, that's all pretty good sized stuff, but sometimes you'll have some of that that'll be just as fine as the black sand, which basically is called concentrate. And then it's going to go, Jim's going to tell you about these crucibles where they heat it up and pour it into gold ingots and bars so that it can be made into coins or jewelry or whatever, and then you have the finished product. You guys see that down there? Here, I'll show you. I can't tell you.